Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. A real honor to be in the House speaking on this important justice bill. C-75, sadly, is a deeply flawed 302-page omnibus bill that's been introduced by the government. Are there some positive aspects? Yes. But the way it's been done and rammed through, and not proper dialogue, not proper consideration, and ignoring the opposition members at committee, Mr. Speaker, it's a very serious and concerning process. The previous speaker, when asked about the bill, said it was the Conservative comments were regrettable rhetoric. Well, it's that attitude where they have a majority in the House where they can ram things through and get their way every time, and it appears like an arrogant attitude, Mr. Speaker, where we're dismissing any critique. The government is. And so the Prime Minister continues to show he doesn't take the safety and security of Canadians serious through this bill because he's not listening to positive critique. He's watering down serious offenses such as participating in impaired driving causing bodily harm, using a date rape drug, human trafficking. Mr. Speaker, these are all serious crimes that he's watering down. So, Mr. Speaker, there is 136, I believe, 136 offenses that are included in C-75. And offenses like participating in the activities of a terrorist group. Now, this is one of two amendments that were made at the Justice Committee, coming from the Conservative Party, and the government then permitted their members in committee to accept an amendment on that one, and that was withdrawn. Also advocating for genocide. Now, Mr. Speaker, how did they come up with this list of 136? And why did they only accept to remove two, advocating genocide and participating in a terrorist group? What about the under 134? Well, Mr. Speaker, what they've done is they've taken any offense that is a serious indictable offense with a maximum sentence of 10 years, and they've grouped them into one group, and we have C-75 in front of us. Offenses like prison breach, municipal corruption, influencing a municipal official, influencing or negotiating appointments or deals in offices, obstructing violence against a clergy person, keeping a common body house, punishment for infanticide, concealing the body of a child. So there's these 134 offenses, and do some of them need to be updated? Yes, it needs to be done in a constructive, proper way. Mr. Speaker, the Criminal Code of Canada did not come into place a year ago. It's come through the judicial system, through the legal system, through the legislative system, years and years. Canada celebrated last year its 150th birthday, and over these years, we've learned from other countries to find out what the laws should be in, what is appropriate sentencing, and also respecting the courts and giving the courts discretion. And over these years, Mr. Speaker, we've come up with appropriate sentencing. To review this is a good practice. It should be done. And one of the things I'm quite concerned about, in the last Parliament, we had a major focus on the victims in Canada, and the Victims' Bill of Rights came out, and that was a huge accomplishment. And part of that was a system where there would be a surcharge, a victim surcharge, where an offender would be paying into a victim's fund to take care of victims. Now, that's one of the things in 75 that is now being repealed. It'll be gone, again, taking away opportunities to take care of victims. But, Mr. Speaker, I would like to focus on, in the little time that I have to speak, on impaired driving. Mr. Speaker, impaired driving causing bodily harm, fact is causing death, is the #1 criminal offense in Canada. There are more people killed every year in Canada by a person driving their vehicle impaired. It's a very serious offense. I have received tens of thousands of petitions, and there's usually not a week that goes by that I'm not honored to present a petition for the Families for Justice. Now, every one of these Families for Justice have lost a loved one. Marquita Cullius lives in my riding. She's a president of Families for Justice. She lost her daughter. Her and Victor lost their beautiful daughter, 21-year-old, and she was killed by a drunk driver. And so they have sent these petitions, and this is what they're asking for in these petitions, that the charge of impaired driving causing death should be called vehicular homicide, that if a person is arrested and convicted of impaired driving, there should be an automatic 1-year driving prohibition. Sounds reasonable. If a person is convicted of causing bodily harm while impaired by being under the influence of either drugs or alcohol, there should be a minimum mandatory sentence of 2 years imprisonment. That's causing bodily harm. If a person is convicted of causing a collision while being impaired by being under the influence, if they're causing a collision and a person is killed, it should be a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years. Well, this is what we've heard in this House, and this is what we heard in the last Parliament. And so the last Parliament, the government introduced a bill to toughen up and come up with what Families for Justice is asking for a mandatory minimum sentence. It did not include calling it vehicular homicide. It was dealing with the mandatory minimums, getting tough on crime. So, Mr. Speaker, just at the end of the last Parliament, Families for Justice contacted each of the leaders, and the present Prime Minister wrote a letter to Families for Justice and said, yes, he would support getting tough on crime. Now, sadly, what we see in C-75, which we're debating right now, this is what they will be removing: impaired driving causing bodily harm, failing to provide a bodily sample, blood alcohol over the limit. Mr. Speaker, they're going to take this out of indictable offenses and make it a hybrid offense. In actuality, what this will do is it will take it out of, at the choice of the prosecution, it will take it out of federal court and put it, because it could be a summary conviction, it will put it into the provincial. It's the federal government downloading onto provincial courts. And in British Columbia, I've been regularly shocked to see that court cases are thrown out of court by judges because it's gone on too long. People have had to wait. And then you end up with the federal government downloading all of these indictable cases and passing them on to the provincial court. This will exasperate provincial justice, the criminal code being enforced by making serious offenses like kidnapping, abducting a person under the age of 14. Why would somebody that would abduct a child be now made from an indictable serious offense, 10-year maximum, now making it available to be a summary conviction? 2 years less a day into the provincial courts. This is a government that says one thing, Mr. Speaker, and does something totally different. They told Marquita Cullius and Families for Justice and other Canadians, they promised they were going to get tough. Fact is, Mr. Speaker, we hear regularly they're getting tough on impaired driving, but in fact, they do nothing like that. What they say and what they do are two totally different things. It brings to mind the proverb, a tree is known by its fruit. If there are apples on the branches of that tree, it's an apple tree. If there are pears on it, it's a pear tree. If it's a tree where what they say and what they do, if it's a tree of deceit, the country groans. Canadians want justice, Mr. Speaker. They want a government that, when they make legislative changes, they spend the time and do it right and not rush it through, not ram it through because they have the ability to do it. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope the government will ask some good questions, some important questions, because the way they're handling C-75, I've got a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, and I do get regular input from my constituents. But C-75, I'm sure every one of us are getting the same kind of phone calls saying, vote against C-75. So that's what I plan to do.
Questions and comments? The Honourable